am Amoka Mom, and I am back with a conversation I had with my 3-year-old and my 7-year-old. They climbed in the bed with my husband and I this morning, and the topic of the day was hair. I overheard my 3-year-old talking to her friend, a neighbor that was over playing yesterday, a little Caucasian girl, asking her, "Why is your hair always out? My mom always does my hair in braids, but you always wear your hair out." And she was really perplexed by that, and the little girl didn't know what to answer her. I noticed that this is a really awkward thing in our society. Talking to my friend of mine about how we both had the same experience with different people in completely different contexts, where a Caucasian friend was trying to describe someone to us, and the other person was black, but they thought that they could use every other descriptive term without using that term, as if it was racist to say black. And I think that stems from the leaning that a lot of people have, that the solution to our problems is to just be colorblind. And I don't think we need to be colorblind, because we notice color. I think we need to be accepting of the differences that we have and learn how to talk about it in an accepting way. And that's what I'm trying to do with the girls. So my 3-year-old wanted to know, why does her hair hang and mine doesn't? And so I said to my daughter, well, let's talk about how it all began. Let's presuppose that people who have hair like us, that there was an intentional design for this hair. Let's presuppose that that person, God put that person in a very hot place. Well, what happens to your hair when I take the braids out and your hair is out in an afro? If it's hot, if it's humid, there's a lot of moisture in the air, what happens to your hair? And one of my, probably my 7-year-old chimed in, well, it starts to shrink. It starts to lift off of my neck, off of my back, and it rises up. And I said, well, what's good about that? Well, if I'm feeling really hot and the air can hit my neck and my back and I feel cooler, that's a good thing about what my hair does. I said, well, what else does it do? They talked about how well it gets bigger and bigger and then tighter and tighter, and it makes a shape like this around my head. And my husband was kind of looking at me like, man, you get real deep with this. But I was like, what does this look like? And so my husband chimes in, it looks like a hat. And then the girls were like, yeah, it's like a hat. Well, what does a hat do? And then we talked about how, well, it might shield your eyes from the sun, get the heat off your face. And we talked about how, well, the hair starts to mesh together, and it's almost like it weaves like a cloth, or like a basket over our head. Well, what does that do for your scalp? And we talked about how, well, it keeps the heat off your scalp, and you're generally more comfortable. And then we said, well, let's talk about your friend. What if their great 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 ancestors, what if God put them in a place that's cool? Well, their hair is smooth, and this girl has really fine hair. Their hair is smooth and it's fine, and it hangs, and it hangs down their back, and it covers their back. Well, what would that do? Well, that would make them warm. That would keep them warm. Well, what if someone threw a bucket of water on their head or something, and there's some place where it's cold? You know how long it takes for your hair to dry when it's all tight and meshed like that on your head. How would their hair dry? Oh, well, their hair might dry faster. Well, that would be a really good thing, because when you're cold, you don't want your head to be wet, because then you'd be cold. And conversely, when you're hot and you throw water on your head and it takes a while for it to evaporate, it keeps you cool. So we went back to, wow, this was a fantastic design. Our hair has a purpose. Our hair is beautiful, but it has a purpose. And when you look at its purpose, you see that it's not problematic. And then we began to talk about, well, if it has a purpose and it's going in a certain direction, and now we're not in a place where it's hot all the time. Now sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold, sometimes we want our hair to stretch out. Now everybody has mixed together. I'm looking at her hair, she's looking at my hair. I like this about her hair, she likes that about my hair. And we're all trying to make our hair do what it wasn't made to do. Or maybe, we want to appreciate someone else's beauty. And we talked about how it's not so much a conversation about whether it's right or wrong to do that, but just realizing that there may be some consequences to doing that. Because anything in nature where we try to work it against what it was designed to do, it might break, it might not function as well, it might not look or behave the way we want it to behave, or it may be very difficult for us to make it do that because it wasn't made to do that. And we talked about that in the context of hair. And I know y'all are thinking this was a seriously long conversation, and it was, I by no means am saying that this conversation fixed it all, answered all their questions, and now they're gung ho about everything. But I think it's a place to start. And I think these are important conversations to have. But I just got a kick out of seeing them being completely 100% engaged in the conversation. And having my 7-year-old, who's typically a person that has a lot of questions, who doesn't necessarily always take whatever you say right away, really saying, wow, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And so I hope that helps somebody. Be blessed.